"Perhaps," suggested Tangle, feeling ashamed, but not too much so to say a word for herself, "perhaps that is because the tree made me cry so." "My poor darling," said the lady, looking now as if the moon were melted in her eyes, and kissing her little face, dirty as it was. "The naughty tree must suffer for making a girl cry." "And what is your name, please?" asked Tangle. "Grandmother," answered the lady. "Is it really?" "Yes, indeed. I never tell stories, even in fun." "How good of you!" "I couldn't if I tried. It would come true if I said it, and then I should be punished enough." And she smiled, like the sun through a summer shower. "But now," she went on, "I must get you washed and dressed, and then we shall have some supper." "Oh, I had supper long ago," said Tangle. "Yes, indeed you had," answered the lady, 3 years ago. You don't know that it is 3 years since you ran away from the bears. You are 13 and more now." Tangle could only stare. She felt quite sure it was true. "You will not be afraid of anything I do with you, will you?" said the lady. "I will try very hard not to be, but I can't be certain, you know," replied Tangle. "I like your saying so, and I shall be quite satisfied," answered the lady. She took off the girl's nightgown, rose with her in her arms, and going to the wall of the cottage opened a door. Then Tangle saw a deep tank, the sides of which were filled with green plants, which had flowers of all colors. There was a roof over it, like the roof of the cottage. It was filled with beautiful clear water, in which swam a multitude of such fishes as the one that had led her to the cottage. It was the light their colors gave that showed the place in which they were. The lady spoke some words Tangle could not understand, and threw her into the tank. The fishes came crowding about her. 2 or 3 of them got under her head and kept it up. The rest of them rubbed themselves all over her, and with their wet feathers washed her quite clean. Then the lady, who had been looking on all the time, spoke again, whereupon some 30 or 40 of the fishes rose out of the water underneath Tangle, and so bore her up to the arms the lady held out to take her. She carried her back to the fire, and having dried her well, opened a chest, and taking out the finest linen garments, smelling of grass and lavender, put them upon her, and over all a green dress, just like her own, shining like hers, and soft like hers, and going into just such lovely folds from the waist, where it was tied with a brown cord, to her bare feet. "Won't you give me a pair of shoes, too, grandmother?" said Tangle. "No, my dear, no shoes. Look here, I wear no shoes." So saying, she lifted her dress a little, and there were the loveliest white feet, but no shoes. Then Tangle was content to go without shoes too, and the lady sat down with her again, and combed her hair, and brushed it, and then left it to dry while she got the supper. First she got bread out of one hole in the wall, then milk out of another, then several kinds of fruit out of a third. And then she went to the pot on the fire, and took out the fish, now nicely cooked, and as soon as she had pulled off its feathered skin, ready to be eaten. "But," exclaimed Tangle, and she stared at the fish, and could say no more. "I know what you mean," returned the lady. "You do not like to eat the messenger that brought you home. But it is the kindest return you can make. The creature was afraid to go until it saw me put the pot on, and heard me promise it should be boiled the moment it returned with you. Then it darted out the door at once. You saw it go into the pot of itself the moment it entered, did you not?" "I did," answered Tangle, "and I thought it very strange. But then I saw you, and forgot all about the fish." "In Fairyland," resumed the lady, as they sat down to the table, "the ambition of the animals is to be eaten by the people, for that is their highest end in that condition. But they are not therefore destroyed. Out of that pot comes something more than the dead fish. You will see." Tangle now remarked that the lid was on the pot, but the lady took no further notice of it till they had eaten the fish, which Tangle found nicer than any fish she had ever tasted before. It was as white as snow and as delicate as cream. And the moment she had swallowed a mouthful of it, a change she could not describe began to take place in her. She heard a murmuring all about her, which became more and more articulate, and at length, as she went on eating, grew intelligible. By the time she had finished her share, the sounds of all the animals in the forest came crowding through the door to her ears, for the door still stood wide open, though it was pitch dark outside. And they were no longer sounds only. They were speech, and speech that she could understand. She could tell what the insects in the cottage were saying to each other, too. She had even a suspicion that the trees and flowers all about the cottage were holding midnight communications with each other, but what they said she could not hear. As soon as the fish was eaten, the lady went to the fire and took the lid off the pot. A lovely little creature in human shape, with large white wings, rose out of it, and flew round and round the roof of the cottage, then dropped, fluttering, and nestled in the lap of the lady. She spoke to it some strange words, carried it to the door, and threw it out into the darkness. Tangle heard the flapping of its wings die away in the distance. "Now have we done the fish any harm?" she said, returning. "No," answered Tangle. "I do not think we have. I should not mind eating one every day." "They must wait their time, like you and me too, my little Tangle." And she smiled a smile, which the sadness in it made more lovely. "But," she continued, "I think we may have one for supper tomorrow." So saying, she went to the door of the tank and spoke, and now Tangle understood her perfectly. "I want one of you," she said, "the wisest." Thereupon the fishes got together in the middle of the tank, with their heads forming a circle above the water, and their tails a larger circle beneath it. They were holding a council in which their relative wisdom should be determined. At length one of them flew up into the lady's hand, looking lively and ready. "You know where the rainbow stands?" she asked. "Yes, mother, quite well," answered the fish. "Bring home a young man you will find there, who does not know where to go." The fish was out of the door in a moment. Then the lady told Tangle it was time to go to bed, and opening another door in the side of the cottage, showed her a little arbor, cool and green, with a bed of purple heath growing in it, upon which she threw a large wrapper made of the feathered skins of the wise fishes, shining gorgeous in the firelight. Tangle was soon lost in the strangest, loveliest dreams. And the beautiful lady was in every one of her dreams. In the morning she woke to the rustling of leaves over her head, and the sound of running water. But to her surprise she could find no door, nothing but the moss-grown wall of the cottage. So she crept through an opening in the arbor, and stood in the forest. Then she bathed in a stream that ran merrily through the trees, and felt happier. For having once been in her grandmother's pond, she must be clean and tidy ever after. And having put on her green dress, felt like a lady. She spent that day in the wood, listening to the birds and beasts and creeping things. She understood all that they said, though she could not repeat a word of it. And every kind had a different language, while there was a common, though more limited, understanding between all the inhabitants of the forest. She saw nothing of the beautiful lady, but she felt that she was near her all the time. And she took care not to go out of sight of the cottage. It was round, like a snow hut or a wigwam, and she could see neither door nor window in it. The fact was, it had no windows, and though it was full of doors, they all opened from the inside, and could not even be seen from the outside. She was standing at the foot of a tree in the twilight, listening to a quarrel between a mole and a squirrel, in which the mole told the squirrel that the tail was the best of him, and the squirrel called the mole Spade Fists, when, the darkness having deepened around her, she became aware of something shining in her face, and looking round, saw that the door of the cottage was open, and the red light of the fire flowing from it like a river through the darkness. She left Mole and Squirrel to settle matters as they might, and darted off to the cottage. Entering, she found the pot boiling on the fire, and the grand, lovely lady sitting on the other side of it. "I've been watching you all day," said the lady. "You shall have something to eat by and by, but we must wait till our supper comes home." She took Tangle on her knee, and began to sing to her, such songs as made her wish she could listen to them forever. But at length in rushed the shining fish, and snuggled down in the pot. It was followed by a youth who had outgrown his worn garments. His face was ruddy with health, and in his hand he carried a little jewel which sparkled in the firelight. The first words the lady said were, "What is that in your hand, Mossy?" Now Mossy was the name his companions had given him, because he had a favourite stone covered with moss, on which he used to sit whole days reading, and they said the moss had begun to grow upon him too. Mossy held out his hand. The moment the lady saw that it was the golden key, she rose from her chair, kissed Mossy on the forehead, made him sit down on her seat, and stood before him like a servant. Mossy could not bear this, and rose at once, but the lady begged him with tears in her beautiful eyes to sit and let her wait on him. "But you are a great, splendid, beautiful lady," said Mossy. "Yes, I am, but I work all day long. That is my pleasure, and you will have to leave me so soon." "How do you know that, if you please, madam?" asked Mossy. "Because you have got the golden key." "But I don't know what it is for. I can't find the keyhole. Will you tell me what to do?" "You must look for the keyhole. That is your work. I cannot help you. I can only tell you that if you look for it, you will find it." "What kind of box will it open? What is there inside?" "I do not know. I dream about it, but I know nothing." "Must I go at once?" "You may stop here tonight and have some of my supper, but you must go in the morning. All I can do for you is to give you clothes. Here is a girl called Tangle, whom you must take with you." "That will be nice," said Mossy. "No, no," said Tangle. "I don't want to leave you. Please, grandmother." "You must go with him, Tangle. I am sorry to lose you, but it will be the best thing for you. Even the fishes, you see, have to go into the pot, and then out into the dark. If you fall in with the old man of the sea, mind you ask him whether he has not got some more fishes ready for me. My tank is getting thin." So saying, she took the fish from the pot, and put the lid on as before. They sat down and ate the fish, and then the winged creature rose from the pot, circled the roof, and settled on the lady's lap. She talked to it, carried it to the door, and threw it out into the dark. They heard the flap of its wings die away in the distance. The lady then showed Mossy into just such another chamber as that of Tangle, and in the morning he found a suit of clothes laid beside him. He looked very handsome in them. But the wearer of grandmother's clothes never thinks about how he or she looks, but thinks always how handsome other people are. Tangle was very unwilling to go. "Why should I leave you? I don't know the young man," she said to the lady. "I am never allowed to keep my children long. You need not go with him except you please, but you must go some day. And I should like you to go with him, for he has the golden key. No girl need be afraid to go with the youth that has the golden key. You will take care of her, Mossy, will you not?" "That I will," said Mossy. And Tangle cast a glance at him, and thought she should like to go with him. "And," said the lady, "if you should lose each other as you go through I never can remember the name of that country, do not be afraid, but go on and on." She kissed Tangle on the mouth and Mossy on the forehead, led them to the door, and waved her hand eastward. Mossy and Tangle took each other's hand and walked away into the depth of the forest. In his right hand Mossy held the golden key. They wandered thus a long way, with endless amusement from the talk of the animals. They soon learned enough of their language to ask them necessary questions. The squirrels were always friendly, and gave them nuts out of their own hoards. But the bees were selfish and rude, justifying themselves on the ground that Tangle and Mossy were not subjects of their queen, and charity must begin at home, though indeed they had not one drone in their poorhouse at the time. Even the blinking moles would fetch them an earth nut or a truffle now and then, talking as if their mouths, as well as their eyes and ears, were full of cotton wool, or their own velvety fur. By the time they got out of the forest, they were very fond of each other, and Tangle was not in the least sorry that her grandmother had sent her away with Mossy.